Good afternoon, everyone. We're all here today to speak about the upcoming 2024 50th Anniversary EMS Week, which is May 19th to May 24th. Sunday's theme this year is Health, Wellness, and Resiliency in EMS. We want to recognize the strain our members face as first responders and talk about how we can continue a resilient workforce. The panel is comprised of members nominated by their respective battalion chiefs to give input on topics about behavioral health in our department. We hope today's discussion allows for this topic to continue with future roundtables within our respective firehouses. Now let's introduce ourselves.
All right, good morning. I'm Assistant Fire Chief Andre Edwards.
Good morning. I'm Ken Hunter, the Diversity and EEO Program Manager.
I am Daniel Brong, Lieutenant Engine 32, Platoon Number 2, and also the coordinator for our peer support program.
Ronit Rieger, Behavioral Health Coordinator.
Fred Gordon, Lieutenant at Fire Prevention.
I'm Firefighter Jamal Woods, assigned to Engine 28, Truck 14.
Firefighter Dimitri Brown. I'm assigned to Engine 30, Platoon Number 2.
EMS Captain Aaron Humphrey, EMS 1, Number 3.
Dave Smith, Truck 11, Number 4.
Technician Brian Woodburn, Truck 5, Number 3.
Firefighter Oladi Griffith, Engine 28, Truck 14, Number 1.
We'll start with question 1. How can we reduce the negative stigma behind mental health, getting help, and having open discussions about stressors we deal with on and off the job?
Thank you. I think that's a good question because that's a huge problem among many communities and many cultures. But things that I've looked up that I've found that one thing is to know the facts and be aware of attitudes and behaviors. Choose words carefully, educate others, and focus on the positive. I think if we can do that, we'll kind of get those points into our DNA at some point, I think we can eliminate or at least break down the barrier of stigmas.
I have about 20 years on the job. In the beginning of my career in the fire service, it was a lot of fun and games. So one of the things that kind of stopped me from talking about it was not thinking it would be taken seriously. And so I think that we have to remember that we're a family, and just the same way as a family may play around and play games and enjoy their time at the firehouse, that a family also cares about each other, and that we'd be surprised at how much help when we open up to talk about some of the issues that we may be facing, how much support and everything that we'll get from the people around us.
I think for myself as an officer and seeing just the impact you can have with your crew if you share or have an open mindset with them. You have to give them the ability to be willing to share something they're going through, and that starts by building that trust and asking and just checking in on them when they're not at work. If something comes up, if someone takes EAL, it's not something they're used to. Finding out as simple as, hey, is everything okay, can make the difference. And then that allows the individual to communicate with you when they're not ready, or when something major is going on, they turn to you and you've got an answer for them or a way to help them.
Well, I have all of 7 months on the job, but I do have 20 years in behavioral health and specifically trauma. And in that time in my career, I've noticed that we rarely take a look at helping the helpers. We don't realize the effect it has on first responders in terms of their behavioral health and what they're seeing on the job on a regular basis. So I'm hoping that we move from the stigma around behavioral health to actually normalizing conversations around it.
Just one of the things to keep in mind is just with the stigmas and everything, just trying to normalize it from the beginning. Just when we enter the fire service, getting rid of all the toughness and just understanding that, having dialogues, trying to understand where everyone comes from, and knowing how things are to affect everyone differently, but just trying to have conversations and making it open, not trying to when people put up shields and get defensive, just trying to understand one another and talking about things. A lot of times, either between games or whatnot in the firehouse and everything, people get defensive, put up those walls, and just trying to make sure that, as others stated, that family atmosphere where it's okay to have a good time, but at the end of the day, we need to be respectful and understand and just talk about these things and make sure that everyone understands that it's okay to talk about that.
Assist individuals, it starts day one on this job, in this career itself. It's studying the individuals, the good things and the bad, making individuals feel comfortable with opening up and talking to you itself. Calling yourself a brother and a sister isn't just saying it. I'm your brother, I'm your sister. But being able to step up and be there for an individual, good, bad, and ugly, really matters. And it starts with trust itself. Having an individual being able to trust you that what they're saying to you matters. And when you can have an individual feel like what they're saying matters, means a whole lot. So everybody at this table is a sibling to me. A brother and a sister starts at the top. So if I'm going through something, I should feel comfortable with going to an individual, speaking about what's bothering me, and having that safe space in that moment, whereas though it's not going to be brought up as a joke. So feeling comfortable with talking to an individual about what you may have going on, and really meaning when you say you're an individual's brother and sister, making an individual feel comfortable in that moment. It matters.
I would say it first starts with acknowledging that this career is a demanding career, and we see a lot of things that affect us on the job, and just acknowledging when you mix that with issues that you have off the job, just acknowledging that is something that can kind of affect your everyday life. And then, like these guys are saying, normalizing having those discussions, because you might talk to somebody else who's having the same issue you're having, and now you found somebody that you're comfortable with. So just acknowledging and then normalizing the discussion.
So I'd taken some notes and also wanted to add a few things on my own. When it comes to actually normalizing mental health and resiliency, I think we've done a really good job thus far. We have generationally, we used to actually create anticipatory stressors about you're coming on this job, you're gonna see some stuff, you're gonna do some stuff, all of the stuff you're gonna carry with you, and we used to create this anticipation of trauma and this anticipation of stress in the job. And instead of doing that, we can actually say, these are resources that we have, and everybody's going to internalize their own stress in a different way. And we can get rid of creating, that anticipation of stressors and that anticipation of crisis in our own lives. And also, as a manager, pattern recognition, coming at discussions from a really genuine place where it comes to choosing your words wisely, and recognizing our members' patterns, and coming at mental health and coming at the support, especially from a managerial level, because managing other humans is one of the hardest things you can do as a job. And that comes from wagon drivers, that comes from, the most senior person at a firehouse, and it also comes from a top-down scenario. And some of our job includes, again, that pattern recognition and coming at mental health and mental health conversations from a genuine place and creating a calmer environment and actually allowing people to have discussions, especially in rooms like this where we have such vastly different experiences.
How can we reduce the negative stigma behind mental health? Sorry, I had to reread the question. One of the ways we can reduce it is probably just more information getting out of there. I know the peer support does Wednesdays are going around with the therapy dog and all that, but like, for instance, your name?
Ronit.
Miss Ronit, like, I'm not sure if you're the department or you're the union or what your job, you said been on 7 months and we haven't really been introduced to these resources, right? There's a lot of great resources in this department that members aren't aware of, and that it's not a end of your career, you're going to get blackballed kind of thing if you do raise your hand to get help, right? It's no different than if you broke your leg and you're gone for a month, and if you had to take a month off to go get some help and talk to somebody, and your brain's just like your body, things break, especially over time. And like we had discussed earlier, like, everybody has different experiences, different upbringings. Everybody at this table could go on the same call and only one person's affected by it just because that's reminds them of their grandmother. Everybody else might not even notice it except for that one person. So, you're not uniquely messed up if something bothers you. You're human, right? Everyone's got their own experiences, and that was a hard one for me to wrap my head around, that I wasn't uniquely messed up or broken or I can't handle this job. It was, hey, everybody's got issues. And the more I openly talked about it, the more I realized our whole department has issues. And it's a big secret club that nobody wants to openly say that they're in, but a lot of people are, and a lot of people are empathetic, and you're not going to get, blackballed, and nobody's going to, you hear about that guy over there. It's, oh, hey man, good to see you back. Nobody looks at it funny, especially nowadays. It's gotten better where it's, oh, what Aaron got for it? Had some issues. All right, cool. She all right? Yeah, cool. The end of discussion. Nobody looks at her sideways or nothing.
I think now we're opening those barriers, we're breaking those walls down and doing that stuff with communication. I know, like with my experience, like when I came on and started to go down that dark path for a while, it was those, oh, you don't talk about it, or when you finally did reach a point and you reached out, like it's educating the officers when somebody actually says something. And I think we're starting to do that stuff now. I think, over time it's going to adapt and evolve and get better and get more fluid. And I think being more fluid is where it's going to really take off, and it's doing this stuff here and then adding to it and then going back to your firehouses and having those discussions and opening those doors and saying, hey, it's okay to talk about it, or seeing a guy and recognizing it and saying, hey, what's going on, like we were talking about earlier, somebody coming in at was a religious 5 o'clock in the morning. Now they're 6:30, 6:45. Oh, they're AWOL. Hey, what's going on? Pull them to the side. It doesn't have to be in a group setting. You just start small and just take those little blocks and just build it from there.
Can agree with what everybody said here. I think that the sentiment that everybody's expressing is one that is rooted in the interpersonal connection that we all have, and that would be mostly within the firehouse. So I want to touch on how we can be affected systematically, and that means from the top on down, not just from the level of where we all are. And I think that can stop, or that can be helped if we can somehow remove the excessive bureaucracy that's involved in how we treat mental health as a department. So I've been on a call with someone who experienced a traumatic incident of a shooting. She was herself shot. And then we went on a call of a shooting. And after that, we had to go and speak to the psychologist. She was terrified of speaking to the psychologist because of the red tape involved. What are you putting in my file? What is that going to look like? How is the department going to treat that? I know someone right now who is going through a situation where he's experiencing alcoholism, and he actually reached out for help. And what the department did is reacted in a way that felt to him as a punishment as opposed to a resource and a help. Beyond being reactive when someone reaches out in a time of crisis, what are some of the things that we can do to proactively try to take care of our first responders before they get to a point of crisis? So I think that we all just touched on how we can help one another. But I think that there's some things that we're still that still are kind of laughed at, and but there is empirical evidence to a lot of these things where we can be helped. And I'm talking about breath work, I'm talking about yoga, I'm talking about mindfulness, I'm talking about meditation. So we have a lot of practices or a lot of things that we have accessibility to where we have discounts as firefighters. I go to yoga, I go to Core Power Yoga, and I don't understand why we aren't allowed to have a discount there, because that's something that will help us empirically. Like I said, it's been proven. Yoga will help our mental status. Breath work will help our mental status. It can help alleviate stress, all of these things. So I think if we were provided access to programs that we could independently reach out to on our own, then we could begin the work of helping ourselves. Even Peloton has a breath work and a yoga thing. So if we were able to access these things so that we could begin the work of helping to lower and regulate our own stress, so that when we come into these environments, we're already at a place of calm and steadiness, then I think that that will be beneficial for us.
So I'm gonna look at it in a different way, because everybody here is gonna talk about what we can do for the members as far as that goes. And that's great, but I think having some stuff when we have new hires, and then continual, open forums or stuff for families, so that they can also kind of see and recognize the stressors that may be coming, how to help reduce those stressors when we come home from bad days, stuff like that. The other part of it is, and I'll talk about at least for men, adding stuff to our yearly physicals, like, checking certain blood works, like testosterone levels and stuff like that, to see if there's correlation between that aspect of your testosterone levels versus your mental health and well-being.
Proactively. So they had touched on it before, talking about keeping an eye on each other, right? The biggest indicator in general is family and friends, right? They're going to notice if something's off with you before you do. Like if you're just perhaps not in the mood or whatever, but they will notice that there's something going on with you, and don't brush that off if somebody does ask you, hey man, you don't seem like yourself today, what's going on? And those little red flags end up becoming something big, right? Like when I started down the rabbit hole with the therapy and the center and all that, he described it as a big ball of Christmas lights in the basement. You pull it out, it's a big ball, and you plug it in, and you're trying to find the one bulb that's out. But if you had replaced the bulb as soon as it broke, and recognized it early on, like I'm sure most of us here would like to go back in time to our 20-year-old self when we joined the fire department and say, hey, start talking to somebody now. Take this stuff seriously, because you're younger, you don't really think about it that much. And it's in general with youth, you don't really think about any of this stuff, or the fact that really messed up call you were on might actually have affected you, or your childhood had affected you, stuff like that. As far as like the other things we can do, like as a shift, as a house, like that's a big debate back and forth in our house about like, oh, what's our outing going to be? And some of the members will just want to go to the bar or want to go to a lounge, and I'm like, well, that's just going to the bar. That's not an outing. Like having things, as you were saying, like positive activities, positive things, like the general fire department, response to anything is, oh, we're just going to go drink, or we're going to have a fishing trip and we're all going to get drunk. We're going to go golf tournament, we're all going to get drunk. Everything about it involves, just going out to get drunk, not like, hey, let's all get our kids and go to the zoo, or, let's go do something like whitewater rafting or something where it's a positive activity.
Also, the touching on team buildings in healthy ways. I think that doesn't necessarily have to be at just a firehouse level. That can be box seats at the Nats game that are going at a group rate, or something that we can do as a department wide. So many times I see on social media that there's a basketball game between DC Fire and Metro, and I've never heard of our basketball team. We did a video on the hockey event, and I know that people play hockey in this agency. I know that there is a team, but I didn't know about the tournament until I saw it on social media. And that might be me not seeing the resources until it's too late, but clearly there are things and there are groups in this agency that maybe we're just not communicating them well enough, and getting people inside of those groups is really helpful in identifying similar hobbies. The other thing that I just written down is what we've done well in this aspect is that we have begun providing resources, but at the same time, we're not decreasing barriers to those resources. So that's great. We have a peer support team. That's great. We have this questionnaire at PFC. And I'm going to go out on a limb and say I'm not the only person that has had the experience at PFC where they say, answer this questionnaire. If you answer more than 3 yes, you'll have to go upstairs. That's basically our own people telling us to lie about our own mental health, because then we're going to be a problem or have to go talk to someone about it. So that is, look at us, we've provided you a resource. Everybody's getting the same questionnaire, but then we're creating stigma from that level, and we're not breaking down the barriers in order to participate in the solution. So each new program, I think, that comes out, someone or a group of someone's needs to sit down and say, are we providing this resource? And are we also removing barriers in order to utilize it? And I think that's a really important part of shifting into that proactive, because resources are fine, but we have to be able to utilize them. We have to know about them in order to use them. And I think that that's something that's really important. And we have to be able to trust the message, right? And trusting the message is difficult when the message is different, depending on who's answering or who's asking.
Well, it's also making sure you put the right people in the right places too.
Yeah.
Well, kind of on that, when it comes with that stigma, is making sure that we don't just go off of what we heard or that kind of stuff. Like,
I think for me, somebody who doesn't really have that much time on the job, for me, I think it should start on the company level, because just facts are facts. I kind of trust my guys rather than any other files, any other company in the city. So I think it should start on the company level, as far as like doing little things with the guys to kind of getting that comfortability of discussing mental health within amongst each other, because I'm at a busy files where we're constantly running, and I mean, you don't really get the time to you might run 3 shootings back to back, and you don't have that time to kind of gather your thoughts and kind of discuss the trauma or, discuss how you feel about what you just saw. So I think we should have kind of implement something within the company, on the company level, where we can have that time to kind of, sit down as a company and talk about how we feel about what just happened and if that affected us, because sometimes it might not affect, certain members. So I think it should start on the company level.
I'm going off of what you just now said. So we do have a peer support team. The peer support team, in situations like you say, if it's a shooting, that company can go out of service and have a discussion if there need be. When it comes to a crisis itself, and how it can support the members, it support the members now. It doesn't support the members 6 months from now. It doesn't support the members in 2025. It starts now. We're having a roundtable discussion. This is a start in the right direction. This is something that is new to the department itself. And having a conversation itself and us doing this builds confidence in the members itself. And then when members are able to see this discussion, hopefully it can open their eyes to have these discussions themselves at the round table at the firehouse. We have a lot of discussions at the dinner table a lot of times. So building that trust that we spoke on matters, and having individuals know that it's okay to speak up, and having that safe space. I constantly say safe space because generations before us didn't have these discussions. You were taught to be tough. You were taught to, not have emotions, to, just move on, et cetera, et cetera. Now, that showed a sign of strength. But in reality, it actually shows a sign of weakness when you think of it. Back in the days, you were taught to go into a fire and not put your mask on and breathe in the smoke itself. But later on, you catch cancer and you die from it. So being smart matters doing this. So having these discussions and building that trust amongst the individuals matters itself. So it starts now. Us having this discussion matters. So it's starting right now today. So this is a huge discussion we're having. Hopefully the members itself, if you're having issues, you're able to talk up and speak about the issues that you have, because it matters. Whatever you're feeling matters. Whatever you're thinking matters. So know that you matter as an individual yourself, right? And it starts with you. So if you're feeling something inside, if you don't speak on it, you just hold on to it. It's like a solar panel, store energy inside your house. You have a solar panel on your roof, you're storing energy. If you have an issue and you don't speak on it, you're storing it inside. So when you start having the body aches and the headaches and things of that nature, you need to speak on it, because that's when that crisis can take place. So speak on it, have that courage.
So, as my colleagues all stated, these are all great ideas. I agree with all of them, being as far as proactive and doing all these activities and whatnot. However, there's just some things that, at the end of the day, are challenges with everything. And that's like, for instance, it's great to be able to go and say, hey, we're going to go do activities and normalize and get all that stuff happening. But we got to keep in mind that, not everybody always has the opportunity to do that, depending on their home life and everything. So just things that, as far as being proactive, you just have to sometimes look at the whole picture. Talking about going back to the questionnaire, we all know that's the PSC's opportunity to sit there and say, hey, we're trying to gauge your mental health and everything. But we all know, anybody knows that when you look at that, you know what the answers are going to be. You know that if I put this down, I know where this leads to, and the stigma with that and all that. But going back, and I'm kind of going back a little bit to question number one, is that we talked about all the stuff revolving around the firehouse, but what we didn't discuss about is all the a lot of off-job stuff, such as stress that just comes to mind about traveling to and from work, family relationships, off-job relationships, kids, money woes, responsibilities, all that other stuff that plays into our mental health and weighs us down. So part of being proactive is that it's also trying to be proactive with and without your work family and your other family. So I'm not entirely sure, it's just more open discussion and acknowledging it, but trying to be proactive in the sense where you have to be proactive both at home and at work. So just keeping that in mind and understanding and recognizing, those factors. So just food for thought. But all good stuff, but everyone else said too.
Maybe you stole some of my lines.
Sorry.
I was going to say I really appreciate everyone's comments and honesty, because it's food for thought for me in this position and how to expand the position. Proactive is speaking my language. I know that most of the time, especially in this work, there's a lot of reactive, right, on a day-to-day basis. But I do think that if we started from day one, when folks are recruits, all the way through the career life cycle, and provide that psychoeducation, just like you provide folks with the tools to fight a fire or run an EMS call, it's the same thing with behavioral health. It's recognizing different kinds of symptoms, but really getting in there and educating people and training them on recognizing the signs, and then providing them with those resources, and maybe even actually walking them to, like that warm handoff to those resources. I love yoga, I love meditation, breathing, all of that is a form of, a healthy coping with what you guys see, but not one size fits all. So it's really finding what's gonna work for that individual.
and, yes, proactive so that we're not waiting for that crisis to happen, and just providing the skill set so that people can recognize it in others and in themselves and get the help they need before, it hits red level.
I think that the idea of proactive and being proactive starts one with the individual and then the department itself. In a short period of time, the department with our union has created a peer support program that has delivered resources to, I'm going to say, close to 600 members. Whether it's just a conversation or it's rehabilitation facilities. And now we're starting to see how that has really impacted on the level of early communication. A phone call comes to a line that we have for peer support, and the members of the team are getting resources to somebody or reaching out to somebody that may have a similar scenario and providing reassurance to either that officer or that member that called. And it honestly was simple as a conversation that now has developed into further resources, maybe use of their own healthcare, use of programs that have worked in the past from other individuals. And two, that is also a conversation that has grown not just in the firehouses, but from the beginning with recruit classes. And like was said, I think when individuals get ready to retire, they go and hand in their paperwork and start the process. And when they leave this department, they get a check once a month, but does anybody check in and talk to them? Where do we go from there with those individuals?
Being proactive is important, but also in order to be proactive, we need to go back to the first question, address some of the stigmas, and make sure that that's not stopping us from seeking the help that we need. So I know a lot of things were talked about in reference to the PFC, and so we have to make sure we understand that that's still a resource and that we can still utilize it. Because if we go ahead and we go to our annual physical and we check more than 3 boxes and we have to go upstairs, then maybe we need to go upstairs. We need to talk to somebody, and we just have to make sure, when we're reaching out, or we don't want to be afraid of the stigma or what could happen if we reach out to peer support or if we reach out to Ronit. If we have to refer somebody to any of those things, so that way we're being proactive in getting them the help that they may need. But I like what Firefighter Brown said about starting it at the company level. So I've been very fortunate to be part of some really good firehouses. So being assigned to Engine 10, it was a pretty tight-knit group where I know I still talk to people from that firehouse. I used to call them for advice. We go out and do things together. Being assigned to Engine 15, Engine 26, same thing. You'll see Engine 15 or even fire prevention where they do lots of things together on their days off. I could say for me, there's Lieutenant Baldwin. We talk every day at the same time. It's Timmy and Andre time. And just having those conversations with people and building that network. It's important, not even just for people who are on the job, but just outside in your regular life. So like I said, I have friends that I went to high school with and known them forever. I may have not seen them in years, but on, once a month, it's a Friday, Saturday, that's our time to call, check in, see what's going on, how our kids doing, things like that. And just being proactive to have those conversations, because when we do that, then we're a little bit more open and being able to identify if somebody is having some patterns that may not be great. So like Technician Woodburn said, if you see somebody that's, they used to come in at 5 o'clock and now they're coming in at 5:30, 6 o'clock, 6:30, being able to understand that and recognize it because you actually built a personal relationship with the people that you work with and that you're around. And then having those open conversations like Jamal said, and understanding that these resources are here to help you. One of the biggest things I see is whenever we have somebody that's in crisis or something bad happens on the job, there'll be Facebook posts for days, and everybody's like, oh, if you need me, you can call me anytime, and all this stuff, and all of a sudden everybody wants to pour out all of this support. But it's like, maybe if we go ahead and we start having those conversations and we're being a little bit closer at the company level, getting away from the stigmas and stuff like that, then we can be better as a family, as a department, to make sure that that person doesn't get to crisis, that before they get to that point, we've talked to peer support, or we've even at least had a personal conversation with that member. And I think that will go a lot farther in helping everybody be proactive and take care of the mental health of our people in our department.
All right, I guess all this input has been great, and I guess being the last person makes it kind of difficult to get a thought across. But one thing that did occur to me as the diversity and EEO manager in the department is that I look at the world through a people and a cultural lens. And so one of the problems that I've seen and that I've noticed, and talking to different members and things like that, is that organizations who support people who seek them need to be prepared for them to come. So in other words, the red tape and all those things that happen needs to be resolved. So organizations have to, healthcare organizations, for example, there was an example mentioned when someone goes outside of peer support, seeking outside support, then they get to the door and they say, oh, well, you need to do this. Now they've just created another crisis on top of the crisis that the person is seeking assistance with. That's what the stigma is. Well, I'm trying to get help. I can't get help. I'll forget it. I'm just going to deal with it. So we have to make sure as an organization that the outside organizations that we deal with, insurance companies, things like that, are aware that our people may seek you out and all the red tape and everything they need to do needs to be taken care of up front. When we work with our HR needs to make sure when people update their information, needs to make sure it's updated in a timely manner. Usually it's done annually. But if there's an update that comes down, make sure the member knows that they need to do it. Because a lot of people don't know, I need to go ask about this. But it's up to the HR, the human resources, the organizations to let people know this is something you need to do. Now, don't wait. That's right.
You're going to pause for 1 second. What are some behavioral health issues you've dealt with, and how did you positively navigate through it?
I guess for me, I'm going to take it to a more personal level because I have a family member who's dealing with mental health issues right now as we speak. So I kind of caveated into my previous answer about navigating the system and the system being there to support the individual. But at the same time, it's also tough on family members because family members tend to kind of glaze over things because they say, oh, they're okay, until it's too late. And so what happened with me and my family is that we saw the signs, but we really didn't see the signs. Okay, so by the time we saw the signs and paid attention, it was almost too late. That train had left the station, and you couldn't pull it back. And so with that, my recommendation, I know you said what are some of the things that you see, but my recommendation would be to kind of pay attention. As someone said, I think Firefighter Wood said, pay attention to what's going on to those individuals. That's called intrusive leadership, by the way. And you have to pay attention. If someone's going outside of their norm, that's an indication of something's going on. So you may have to pull that person aside. Hey, something going on. I noticed this. Is there always something that you need help with? Can I assist you in some way? I don't want you to tell me everything that's going on. But if there's something I can help you with, at least I can point you in the right direction. Get you to the place you need to go if you need some assistance. And so I'm going to leave it at that because I don't want to go into too much detail because it's going to make me emotional. Okay. So I don't want to go into too much detail about that. But that's kind of my recommendations as it goes around the rest of the table.
All right. So I'm going to try to go through two things that I've had to deal with in short order. So the biggest thing that I've had to deal with was the passing of my wife, which was it's actually 15 years ago today. So that was probably the hardest thing that I've ever had to deal with. Initially, like I said, it was 15 years ago, so when you're in the fire department, all the resources that we have now, for the most part, we didn't have anything. I didn't deal with it at all, or good at all at first. So I have longtime friends on the job, Johnny and Nacho, and so I used to struggle really bad. So I was they called me a crash dummy because all I did was kind of what Dave was talking about, just go out, drink, party, do a lot of things that I shouldn't have been doing, and I hurt a lot of people in the process. I'd be at the firehouse and I'd break down because I'd go open my phone to text her and realize that she's not on the other end, and run to the bathroom and cry. I used to cry on my way into work and go through a lot of stuff. It wasn't until a few years later, actually a couple of years later, where I started going to therapy and talking about it a little bit more and dealing with it. In the very beginning, like days after it happened, he was retired as a lieutenant, I believe, Deon Robertson. His wife had passed away from cancer probably maybe a month or so before my wife died in her accident. And I remember he came to the house and we had a short conversation, and it kind of prepared me for the pain that I was going to feel and what to expect. But beyond that, I didn't know how to deal with things in a positive way. And it wasn't, again, like I said, until after a while where I kind of got my life together and was actually willing to open up and talk to people about it. One of the things I'm thankful for, even though I didn't respond appropriately to the crisis, was the family that I had at the firehouse. So I remember Captain Mark Schweitzer, he called and made sure I had the amount of time off that I had. Truck showed up to the funeral. I didn't even I didn't talk to anybody, so I didn't give them any information. And they were really there to support me. But just for me personally, I didn't resolve it positively at first. The second thing is I think most people know I was involved with the accident with engine 26. So that was 2 years ago, and behavioral health was becoming more something that the department was focused on. And so I actually went to the PFC. They sent us all there and talked to the doctor. And it was one of those things where something happens and you're like, I don't need to go talk to anybody. I just want to be by myself, stuff like that. And I'm very happy that I did it, because I sat and talked to the doctor, and they pretty much explained to me what was going to happen for years to come. Not even what I was going to go through at that moment, but for years to come. And so me and the other people involved, we all went and saw the doctor. I know I still talk to a therapist at least once a month, usually between the accident was in the month of March, so between February to like June, I probably talk to my therapist weekly, just to make it through. But I was able to talk with the doctor, the PFC, talk to my personal therapist, and just recognize the signs and symptoms of when I began to get really stressed out during this time. One of the things that they told me was the phantom pains. So right before the anniversary of the accident, I get really bad back pain, really lethargic, really tired, really hurt. But because I know that it's coming, when it starts to happen, I don't go into the bad habits I used to have as far as things I used to get into. When it gets to around this time, the same thing. Before I would be pretty reckless in the things that I would do, regardless if it was at work, at home, personal life, things like that. But now I've learned how to adjust appropriately. So, people talked about going to yoga, stuff like that. And so Monday, Wednesday, Friday workout. When I was the deputy over in logistics, I brought my gym to logistics, and that was part of the thing where we would work out. Like I said, talking to people. So Ryan Barassa is probably one of him and Johnny Griffin, probably the two best people in the world to me. RB lives probably, I think, an hour and a half from me, so is Johnny. Anytime that I've ever needed them, they've been real. They've been real brothers to me, and made sure that they come and helped out. Me and RB cried together, and I appreciate all of that, and having those conversations and working through it, especially with the accident. it helped me deal with things a lot better than I did when my wife passed away. Because, like I said, it was I was a crash dummy, and I'm just fortunate that I made it through, and God loved me enough to help me keep my life and my job. So that's my story.
19 years ago, I lost a parent. I lost my father, and at that point in time, I wasn't even, I was still a young man, just out of high school and college, and one of the hardest times is probably when the funeral's over and everybody says their goodbyes, when the doors close and you go back to your house and it's a quiet place again. It's one of the quietest things that I think I've ever realized in my life, and it took me years to realize that the things I did were a cry for help, and then being in the role that I have now and learning more and more about mental health is to positively change that and make sure that anybody that kind of goes through a loss of a parent or a loss of a loved one knows that the more you talk about it, the more you celebrate the positives, and you look back, the hard time is just, a little thing that you can keep in your mind, but everything that you did positively with that person. So it's definitely not easy, and I don't wish it upon anybody, and I know many people have gone through it.
So I won't share a personal story because I'm not a firefighter, so it doesn't make sense exactly. But I will say something that Dan just made me think of. We often look at the trials and tribulations of life, and yes, they can eventually become issues in our lives, and even so much as disorders. But there is not every stressful situation or traumatic situation has to be. They all will inevitably develop into post-traumatic stress, but they don't have to develop into acute stress disorder or even post-traumatic stress disorder. You can make meaning out of them, and sort of what Dan was touching on in terms of like celebrating some of the significant memories of loved ones that have passed, but also on the job what you guys see regularly, like making meaning and eventually developing that into post-traumatic growth is a real thing. And I think we so often look at the negative of behavioral health and everything, but there's a positive side of it too.
So for me, I guess during the years of the pandemic, several things happened all at the same time, such as I lost one of my parents. My wife is still dealing with long haul COVID, so she deals with all the issues associated with that, which was a big issue with her mental health to the point where she actually contemplated and attempted suicide. So just with all that and losing some friends on the job that due to mental health, I just know that I dealt with it in positive and negative ways, because it's the truth is that when I kind of just got down to things, I know that there were several arguments, a lot of yelling, just ways looking at it, knowing that while maybe not having something that was per se like full-blown PTSD, but I know that maybe bouts of depression or anxiety, just different aspects that you kind of find their way into your life. But I mean, at the end of the day, a lot of different things. Sometimes they were good, like I would immerse myself in chores or walking the dog or just being with my kids and just enjoying that time and not having to worry about anything other than what they're going through, because I have young kids. But also just, sometimes just zoning out, alone time where it's just like I don't want to think about anything, just scrolling on the phone or something. Just knowing that it's not necessarily positive, but just knowing that it's just taking my mind off everything that's going on. So, but recognizing it, and even when those fights or arguments occur, just knowing at the end, like, to apologize and say I recognize that this was not the right way to deal with it, and I'm sorry for that. But just understanding both, mostly knowing the positive, but understanding when you're negative, just making sure that you don't leave it like that. But yeah, that's that's the way I dealt with it.
For me, first thing that affected me the most was I went through a divorce. I didn't think the divorce would affect me as much. Going from being a everyday dad and seeing your family every single day, and it was a culture shock that hit me. Not having that same atmosphere that I was so used to affected me a lot. It's my real first time I've even speaking on it, honestly, but it did affect me a lot. Not being in that home structure itself that I had built bothered me a lot. And then I lost my mom a year and a half ago, which turned my world upside down. My mom fought cancer for 13 years. I've told this story before. And that was my best friend. So for 13 years, watching her fight cancer and me being there with her for them 13 years, it was like I was fighting cancer as well. In November the 1st, 2022, my mom passed. She died holding my hand. It was part of me died with her. And as Chief Ed was spoken on, holidays, I hated it. Birthdays, I hated it. I'm still making an adjustment to this day. Mother's Day just passed, and the body pains. And things he spoke on, I felt it. I don't mind being emotional or anything. But initially, I dealt with it by drinking. Because I was afraid to face what I was going through. And even have to plan a funeral and bury my mom, it was one of the hardest things that I've ever had to endure. Me being able to speak on it now is showing I've grown and shown some strength itself, but initially I didn't want to speak on it. I was afraid to speak on it because the emotions that came with me speaking on losing my mom. She was a great individual. She cared for everyone, and when she passed, over 100 firemen showed up to her service. And having that support on and off the job matters. Alani calling, checking on me. DeMarco Mendez, one of my closest friends, checking on me. I went through a phase of not wanting to be home, not wanting to be alone, because it's crazy how you can lose someone that you care about so much, and you start having thoughts, the suicidal thoughts and things of that nature, and it crossed my mind, quite frankly. I never had a plan on doing anything in specific to myself, but I understood the thought itself of losing someone, and you question yourself, even if you still wanted to live itself, because of losing someone that meant that much to you and the pain you had to endure during the moments. But trying to get back into fitness, speaking on it, hearing other individuals speak about things that they may have went through and endured, and me hearing Andre just speak about it right now, and it was like a wrench in my stomach. I felt the pain of him speaking on his loss itself, and the pain and the things on his holidays or birthdays and things of that nature. The tiredness, the body aches, and at first I didn't know what it was. And then when he just mentioned it, it made so much more sense. What I just was going through on Mother's Day, me being tired, the body aches, things of that nature, and me talking to a therapist. Ronique, speaking to her about it as well, and also the PFC. I've been upstairs to the PFC, and people always got a lot of negative things to say about it because of their experiences, but I had a good experience with the PFC, going upstairs, talking to the young lady there, and how it assisted me and what I was going through. So speaking about the issues that you may be going through, it matters. Even hearing him just now speak on it, it actually gave me courage before the mic got to me to even speak about this again. So thank you as well. Because him speaking about the issue actually gave me more courage to even speak on it and not leaving out and not speaking on it. So speaking on it, what you may be going through, it matters.
So for me, I only have about 4 years on the job now. I graduated kind of post-COVID. My dad, who was practically my best friend all my life, somebody who anything was going on, that was the person I talked to. He ended up getting lung cancer just after I graduated, so I'm out in the company. He was battling lung cancer. And then a couple months in, I ended up getting injured, so I was off. So I was kind of at home with him a lot. And then once I was able to come back, he ended up passing June of 2021. And I'm still on probation, so I'm kind of trying to cope with my dad passing, and then I got the everyday duties of a probationer, working at a busy firehouse, expectations that's supposed to be upheld. So it was kind of hard for me a lot. I was just coming to work, just kind of being there lackadaisical. And to the guys, it kind of looked like he doesn't want to be here. Like, maybe he just not for him. So it kind of took, Pat Washington, who was at Enter 26, he's a sergeant now. He kind of pulled me to the side and he was like, everything okay? And I ended up letting him know what was going on, and we kind of had that moment. And then in December of that same year, I ended up losing my brother. So it kind of just took me, I did a whole 180, just back to square one. And I pretty much didn't know how to cope with it. I didn't want to be at home, so I was working a lot of overtime, just trying to keep my mind off of it. And I didn't know about the resources of peer support, and Lieutenant Brown, who was actually a sergeant, he ended up working overtime there. And he just, I don't know if he just saw my demeanor or how it was, but he just pulled me to the side. He was like, hey, you good? And I said, nah, man, I just lost my dad and my brother. And he actually recommended the peer support to me. And I mean, I'm a person who's, I kind of put everything to the side. Like I'm kind of almost good with dealing with kind of traumas and things like that. So I kind of tend to push, my problems away, kind of, and I had a mental breakdown back in December, my brother's anniversary. So I kind of been trying to take steps to work on my mental. So like you all been saying, like the yoga, I've been working out more. So just, I would say for me, it was the, acknowledging that mental health issue that I do have, and then just working towards taking steps to, fix that.
So I think mine's a bit of a different story and a bit of a different approach, and it's kind of recognizing, it also brings this back to pretty much to EMS very specifically. Because I think one of the things that we don't recognize, or the terminology that we don't use enough when it comes to mental health and specifically inside of EMS, is caring for the caregiver. And I think that in general, we don't consider EMTs or paramedics the caregivers. We think of a caregiver as someone who's taking care of a sick family member, or someone who is taking care of a sick spouse or child. But the reality is that we are DC's caregivers. And every time you're on a medical call, you are a caregiver. And so there's something different about taking care of caregivers. And for me, I had about 18 months where 3 separate women in my family were diagnosed with breast cancer. One of them was a metastatic terminal diagnosis that had metastasized into the brain. And so it was my mother, my grandmother, and my sister-in-law, all over the course of about 18 months, and like I said, including that terminal diagnosis. Also, my entire family is in California. So I was the caregiver. I was caring for the caregivers. I was the reach out. I was the phone call. I was the support to my sister taking care of her wife. I was the support of my mom, who had been diagnosed with breast cancer, who was taking care of her mother, who was diagnosed with breast cancer. And I was a support for my father, who was calling because he's taking care of my mother. And this is all cumulative. It's as kind of isolating as damaging, being the one that is called on to care for the caregivers. Taking on other people's burdens and taking on other people's sadness and fear and stress. It gives you your own. And one of the things, the couple of the things of how, one, it was a friend who randomly showed up at my house with ice cream who said, last time I talked to you didn't sound right, so we're having some ice cream. And I thought, oh, yeah, you're right. I wasn't actually feeling that great, and this is exactly what I needed. And so that one thing triggered and turned into, we have something that we call now something to look forward to. So at least twice a month, we do try to do it every week, but we always plan something to look forward to. Be it a concert at the Library of Congress, it's free. A movie at the National Gallery of Art. Be careful the ones you choose. Some of them are very weird. There's a particular Italian filmmaker that was very odd one summer. But that's something to look forward to. And these are all things that are off duty for me. This was a single friend. And we dug deeper into our friendship. She was very open with me. That made it easier for me to be open with her. And that's something to look forward to was really helpful. And sometimes it was dinner. Sometimes it was sharing a bottle of wine, watching Sex and the City, something that no one's seen in 20 years, but is just as good. And the other things that I kind of added to that, as I'd mentioned earlier, finding yoga and actually going into like more than the strength and flexibility training, but actually going into the practice itself, which does incorporate breath work and meditation and linking those things together. Also, one of the things that I found, and I'm continuing to do all of these things now because I'm stacking all of these little things that really helped me, is playing in the dirt or gardening. Turned my entire front yard into a pollinator garden and now volunteer for a nonprofit that does the same thing. So a couple of weekends every month I get to play in the dirt. And you would be very surprised at actually how great dirt therapy is. Digging holes in the ground is actually really, really awesome. And so that's kind of my story. The recognition of that cumulative stressors and taking on the burdens of others, recognizing that caring for the caregiver is also very difficult, and then finding small things. And each one of those things, I would say, outside of yoga, that can be an expensive membership, but each one of those things doesn't have a barrier. Digging in the dirt and volunteering for a nonprofit, the only barrier there is time, having that Friday or Saturday off from work. Like I said, the movies at Library of Congress or the concerts at the National Gallery and all of those things, they're free entrances, and you just have to look up the schedule. There's no barrier involved with making some of these plans, and those are the things that made making them a lot easier. And then sometimes it's, wine and bad TV and ice cream with a friend.
Good. So starting off, just appreciate the chief kind of opening up and everybody's honesty. That's a big thing that helps. I know Jamal's kind of the same way, where normally when you ask people, if you're honest about stuff and you ask people how they're doing, they'll tell you because they know you're honest and you're open about your own stuff. So mine was, I won't get into the details because that's not what this is for, but it's also not one of the problems as firefighters is everything's competition, right? Everything is, well, mine's worse than his, or I ran a worse call than him, or well, he's from this firehouse, we were busier than there. There's no way they could deal with something. And it doesn't even have to be fire department related, right? Mental health is, yeah, that's a lot of this what we're talking about, EMS stuff, but as you can tell, some of the members, had issues that weren't a bad call, but that outside life impact will impact you on call as you go on. A lot of the stuff with the mental health is it's your childhood, it's how you were brought up, family members that have passed away, things like that impact you when you go on these calls. So with mine, I missed a couple big red flags. I was getting a little anxious about like being in a closed area. I think it was November or something. We did a metro tunnel walkthrough, and I was sweating, freaking out, holding on to my Tillerman's arm, and people, got out. I was like, man, that was weird. And they thought I was just kind of, playing around with them, but for some reason it was just kind of, oof. And that's a big red flag. Something that has never bothered you before, but all of a sudden just really it does for some reason. And so I think it was 2019, had like a panic attack, which then rolled into like extreme hypervigilance, nightmares, flashbacks, all that stuff. And thankfully, one of the members from Squad 2 down the street from my firehouse, he had been open about his mental health struggles and getting help. So reached out to him, went and saw a therapist, and the therapist basically broke it down to me that we can meet every week for the next 2 years, or the best option I think for you is to go to the Center of Excellence, which is 40 minutes away out in Maryland. It's the only place in the country that's just for firefighters, for addiction or mental health stuff. So I spent about 34 days there. Thankfully, I had an outstanding officer at the time, now retired, Daryl Neiman. He, one phone call to him, and it was, don't worry about your leave, don't worry about the department, I'll take care of it. And that was a big, which I think is one of the next questions or something about that, about having the ability to just make one phone call and somebody say, it's taken care of, don't worry about it, right? So did my time there. It's a rehab place, so there's no cell phone. There's 3 meals a day. They check your stuff. There's 8 hours of classes. It's not a weekend spa retreat, but one of the biggest things that hit me was, as soon as I got there, I was, all kinds of anxiety, being in a closed room, any of that stuff. But, at the door, a fella from, I think it was South Carolina, met me from Truck 11 in South Carolina, who heard I was coming. They made sure I had a plate of food, made sure I had a pillow, brought up a case of soda that I liked, all that kind of stuff. And the biggest thing for all the people there was everyone else was a firefighter, and everybody kind of admitted they were screwed up. So everybody dropped the mask of trying to be a tough guy, right? So everybody was just open about it, looked out for each other, helped each other out. And firefighters being firefighters, we'd have a class, and then afterwards at night, we'd all sit there and figure out how to do it better than that psychiatrist told us. So we spent a lot of time doing our own thing and figuring it out and doing research and stuff. And, we did some yoga, we did some like equine therapy stuff. They did all kinds of crazy, just outlets to help people. The universal trait out of 46 different guys and girls that were there was that isolation, that when I'm going through something, everybody's kind of go-to was work a bunch of overtime, be at the firehouse, and it's kind of counterintuitive, that isolation by going to work, but it was, at work, things make sense, right? If we have a patient who's having trouble breathing, we get them on oxygen, we do A, B, C, which equals D. And our big issue for mental health is it's not a flow chart, right? It's not we pull up, we pull a hose line, I cut a hole in the roof, the smoke goes out, we put water on it. There's no, hey, doc, I have this going on, and they give you one thing and problem solved. So there's a lot of stuff you have to weave through, and a lot of good analogies the therapist told me, but where it's like therapy is it's a tool in the toolbox. So if you were sitting there trying to kick a door in and there's a saw and a Halogen bar sitting there, you're not just going to leave it sitting on the fire truck. Or if there's a tourniquet on the ambulance, you're not going to sit there with your thumb on it. You can go grab something to help it out. That's all they're doing. They can't solve the problem, but they're there to help you. So I still see therapists like once a month now, just to kind of check in. I have had plenty of people in the department reach out to me outside of the peer support, outside of the department, just because there still is that stigma about letting the department know about this, right? So when I first had my going in to get help, it was like Christmas time. Again, I was hyper vigilant, and I picked the worst day in the world, Christmas Eve, to go to sick call. So there was about 90 people crammed in the small room at the PFC. And one of the junior members of the firehouse, who I had told day one that it's okay to ask for help, was there staring at me, pacing around, and kind of called me out, just hey, you all right? And so I admitted, no, I wasn't. And my worst case scenario of raising my hand saying that I needed help was a sweet little old lady at the PFC who said, okay, take a couple days off, you're seeing a therapist, go play with your dog, enjoy nature, do that. It wasn't, getting hauled away and thrown in a padded room. It wasn't, never riding a fire truck again. It was very positive, and she was very supportive. So the PFC isn't the enemy of anything. They're not stopping you from, continuing to do to do this profession. And I think since I've been in, Lieutenant Braun would know, I think there's been about 90 some members who've also gone to the Center of Excellence to get help, and there's a lot of us on the job. And I was off for 2 months, so similar to somebody breaking their leg, it's not that big a deal. Nobody looks at me funny, nobody questions anything. It's just your brain's just like everything else in your body. It gets broken and beaten over time. And it can be compound stuff. That was a big issue I had. One of the issues I struggled with, which I think the peer support team has worked on, is incident that happened years ago might not show up until years later, right? It's not I ran a bad call, I immediately had an issue. It could be years down the road that has bubbled up on you. So good leadership, identifying issues. I know one of the officers from 10 Engine was telling us about they had the third tour in a row having a pediatric cardiac arrest, and he could just tell his guys were down. Nobody was joking, nobody was laughing, so he put the company out of service, contacted peer support, PFC. It got so that awareness of stopping a problem before, not just saying suck it up, move on to the next call. Admitting, hey, this call bothered me. And the biggest lesson I got out of the month at the center was, 99% of the calls we're expected to deal with, right? There's always this dozen a year that are the whole department hears about, everyone knows about, that gets the highlight, but that doesn't mean that random call you went on isn't sad or isn't frustrating. And just saying out loud, hey, that call was really sad, is enough to check that box to say that, hey, I processed something, instead of just shoving it down and moving on to the next one.
So, where to begin? So I honestly, walking through the door of the clinic for me was that turning point. Getting the courage to do it. I mean, it had to take all the negative stuff leading up to that to get to it. Some of the background of it was just layers of traumas over the years that I never dealt with, or I didn't, get a chance to process, just due to either having to help others deal with their issues. 19 years old, freshman in college, visited my grandparents. Week later, murder-suicide. grandfather killed my grandmother, went downstairs, shot himself in the face. Following year, cousin had a seizure. I ended up working him about a year and a month after that. And then got into the fire department because I was like, I'm going to try to help. And you just start running those things and they start adding up. And back then, you didn't have those tools that we have now with peer support. And even when I walked through the door at the clinic, I didn't have the guys at the firehouse or the management group supporting me. I mean, I ran two babies within a year, same apartment building. And it was like, the second go around, like I reached out and I called the battalion office. I was like, hey, I need to talk to somebody. And at the time, we didn't have any of this. It was non-existent. And it was, back then it was the stigma of, you being, for better tense purposes, you're being a bitch. And it was like, okay, like, what do you want me to do? Like, I need to talk to somebody. I need to do something. And I got to kind of like the chief was talking about. I turned into a dumpster fire. I was self-medicating, drugs, alcohol. I mean, I couldn't have passed a drug test if somebody else took it for me. Would just be off in my own little world, just phased out, completely oblivious to what was going on. Alienated my wife, my kids, like all of it. And then like finally got to the point where like I was like, you know what, like this world's better off without me. And that was a hard thing. Like, and when I got to that point, I was literally sitting in my bedroom, and the only thing that saved me, and it was kind of, I had this discussion with the last one when we talked, and I had the gun in my mouth. I had my 12 gauge ready to rock and roll, and the door opened up, and the front door, and my kid came home, my youngest, and it was like I instantly like snapped out of it, and I was like, oh my God, like what am I doing? And from there it was, I didn't talk about it to anybody except for like, hey, I telling my wife at the time, I'm gonna go get help. Like, I'm gonna go figure this out. Like, somebody's gotta be able to help me with something. Like, researched and looked online, and I finally, it took me like 3 or 4 days after that, drinking myself to sleep at night and, popping pills. And finally I was like, all right, it's time to go. And walked into the clinic, and I sat at the clinic door for probably about 30 minutes before I walked in, and I'll never forget the 2 guys that helped me through it, because we didn't have peer support at the time. And Captain Stroman looked at me, and I'd been coaching football, and he was a rival coach, and he saw me, he's like, Wood, what's up? And I looked absolutely horrible, and he was just like, I looked at him, and I was like, I was like, I need help. And he immediately was like, and he grabbed me and took me back, and they did all the stuff, and like for not having the stuff in place, like doing the therapy, like once I opened up and walked in and kind of talked to him, he was like, I got you. I'm gonna go upstairs, talk to Chief Gretz, who I still, several times a year for his anniversaries, for his birthdays, for, on like my kids' birthdays, just randomly just shoot him a message like, hey, thank you. Like I'm here where I'm at now because of the help that you got me. Dr. Cottrell, who's no longer here, I sat in his office for hours, just finally just peeling those layers back and pouring that stuff out. So much so that I got additional therapy, like went outside and was like, I would leave his place, I would leave the clinic and be like, okay, now I'm gonna drive an hour back down the road and I'm gonna go see the other one, and I'm gonna keep downloading this, because I started to feel the weights coming off. And that was walking in the door, that was like the wildest thing. Like it saved my life, and it was kind of coming to do this after having that discussion from doing the video before, and kind of looking back on it. And I was sitting at my youngest son, who walked in the door, and going to his graduation for boot camp, and I got to go see that, and I was like, you know, and how did he not walk through the door? Like, I probably like wouldn't be. And there's been 3 or 4 times where I've actually like sat down and like just had that slight conversations with him. And then when he graduated, I hugged him and I was like, I'm here because of you, and I'm so proud of where you're at, and I get to see this, and like I got to see him get engaged to his fiance, and like I'm gonna get to see that stuff. And it's, you know, it's kind of, I'm finally at the point now where like I talk about it, and I know you were just sitting here saying, you know, everybody's got a bigger, better one, and I was like, but like if you don't open up and stuff like this and lay it out there for guys and girls, when they see this, they're not gonna, like, I want guys and girls to come talk to me. Like, I'll be as descriptive or non-descriptive as you want to talk about the stuff. Like, I will tell you the entire story and not miss a beat, because I want you guys to come see me. I want you to come talk to me. I want you to talk to these guys in peer support or the chief, because he's about as open book as you can get. So.
So I have dealt with extreme and traumatic losses as well. Lost my brother, who was an Irish twin. Lost my father, who was everything. But I am also currently going through some extremely stressful mental health situations. And if you know, you know, I have a 15-year-old daughter. And that is a stress. And I'm also encountering some financial constraints, which has also been extremely stressful. Fortunately for me, I have a very supportive community, village of family, friends. I do see a therapist every other week. I do practice yoga, meditation, journal. These are all things that are helping me forge through in my personal life. So then when it comes to work, and my work family, what I really need is solitude, and that's different from isolation. I need quiet, and that is actually my time of refuge away from the stresses that I'm dealing with in my personal life. And fortunately there at work, I have another family who is very understanding. They might not all know exactly what I'm going through, because I am a very private person. That's just the way that I am. But they do recognize that something's happening, and they allow me that space. They check on me. They ask me if I'm okay. They ask me if I need anything. And that's all the support that I need from them. And they allow me to have my solitude while I'm at work, if we're not running a poem, which that is very helpful for me. And then I have other resources that I've been able to reach out to at work that have been tremendous in terms of helping me with the support that I need financially, able to talk to somebody, and those are things that I've been able to do because I have these relationships, and these people have opened themselves up to me in a way that has made me comfortable to say I need help. Where I'm a very prideful person, so that's not an easy thing for me to do. So these are the ways that I'm trying to positively navigate through the stresses that I am currently engaged in. What support do we need from leadership, the unions, membership, company officers, battalion chiefs, behavioral health professionals, or the District of Columbia in order to maximize the effectiveness of what we have to offer?
I would say, and it kind of piggybacks on what the two technicians were saying, was the department kind of recognizing that this response or the call that we went on can be traumatic, instead of just waiting for it to be that one big traumatic response. Because I can see it from a person who, when I went through something, I was kind of nervous or had fear about talking to somebody as far as like peer support, because that put the company out of service, and now I might be looked at as a crew like, why now we gotta go out of service because this person is having an issue, when it could be somebody who got 4 months on the job or somebody that got 15 years on the job. Like, they don't have that comfortability to say, this is what I'm going through while I'm at work, and can we just take a moment to gather ourselves or gather myself, because like we all agreed on, like we all come from different walks of life, so something that affects me might not affect you, but that doesn't make, you know, what I'm going through lesser than what you're going through. So just the department recognizing that, hey, like this may be a traumatic, something that, you know, the company needs to take a step aside to and just do a little mental check-in, whether it's every hour or so, or like every couple of calls, but definitely just do a mental check-in. And like the technician Wilburn was saying, like implementing that into our annual physicals, like not just checking boxes, but having a therapist, you know, just talk to you about your year, your previous year, or, you know what I'm saying? Just having a department kind of recognize that, you know, every member kind of goes through their own different thing on and off the job.
Support is the main thing, ultimately. We have lovely Ronnie here. When you start speaking about issues itself in the department, you do have resources, and you just got to be able to utilize the resources and know the resources that you do have itself. Back to what Alani was saying, educating the public, that would be perfect. Educating the public, making sure the public knows the resources that they have in place as well matters. But even still, they can have all the resources in place, but if they want to call 911 and they want to go to the hospital, they still want to go to the hospital. We can call nurse triage line and have them speak to them as well. And then once they speak to them, nurse triage line is going to ask them, do you want to be transported? They can, at that moment, they can say, I'll have chest pains now. You're going to be transported to a hospital facility. Some individuals don't want to be home alone. They're home alone. They don't want to utilize a certain resources, so they want to be at the hospital facility where they feel safer at. That just, it happens. You know, sometimes you call AMR, sometimes they're not, more times than likely they're not available. They don't have the units. But having the support at the top. Even when you just now speaking on, you being a young guy on the job and you're on a call and you may want some downtime or you need peer support or speak on it. It starts with the individual itself, I would say. No matter how much time you have on a job, you have to be willing to speak up, voice how you're feeling. Because if you don't, you're holding on to it, right? And once you hold on to it, if you speak up as a young guy on the job and say, I'm going through X, Y, and Z, and that company goes out of service, that older individual may come out and say, you know what, I appreciate you stepping up. Now, I feel the same way you feel. I didn't have the courage to speak up on it, and he's grateful that you did it, right? I think showing courage itself, it's not a time span. You don't have to be on a job for 5 years, 10 years, 15 years. You can show courage if you're on a job for 6 months, right? And being able to speak on what it is you're going through itself. When it comes to the support from the top, I think individuals who are in upper management have to remind themselves where you come from. You were once on the ambulance. You know guys are getting beat from time to time. Remind yourself, you know, even though you're in upper management now, you know, individuals want to know that if they're going through something, they have the support from the top. When it comes from the union, when it comes from the chiefs, when it comes to the officers itself. having that support system, and individuals know whatever it is I'm going through, I have the support by upper management. They're going to have more courage to even speak on the things that they may be going through, knowing that they're not going to be apprehended based off of what they're saying.
I appreciate everybody's involvement today. There's a couple things that I'd like for people to remember and that I think would help everything moving forward. It goes back to the first two questions about removing the stigma. So I think that if we did a great job today having this discussion, being open and being willing to talk about the issues within the department, things that we face personally. I think if we continue to have this at a smaller level, like I said, even at the firehouse, then it'll help out greatly, because a lot of the stories that everybody's told here, it's somebody who you talked to at the firehouse who got you to open up and to seek the help that you need. And so if we can continue to reduce the stigma about opening up and getting that help. Like I said, even if, a couple people talked about positive experiences that they had going to the clinic, positive experiences with peer support, with Ronit, going to some of the other resources that we have here, within the department. Mr. Firefighter Brown over there talked about it. He said that he had some issues back to back and things were going on, and somebody cared and asked what was going on. Same thing for a lot of the people here. It's like if we just go ahead and we care about each other, then a lot of these things will go ahead and we'll be able to get the people the help that they need. And then lastly, to piggyback on what Ken said, I know one of the things that we talked about is the recurring theme of the disconnection between management and the members, right? They say we're disconnected from operations and things like that. So the messaging. So a lot of the resources that we have available, sometimes, just from the conversations I've had with people during firehouse visits, stuff like that, they don't know that they are available. I'm trying to do the same thing with EMS, where we have the EMS Bureau page and trying to summarize a lot of the information so that way the information lives somewhere, so that way you don't feel like if the mental health special order that came out earlier this month, that it doesn't get buried in all the emails, that if there's one place that you can go to look for it, and it'll always be there, that we can work on that messaging. And if we do that, then it'll help to keep everyone aware of what we have to offer, that we can go ahead and reduce the stigma and then continue to look after each other. So I know we're going to close out, and I sincerely want to thank everybody that came to be a part of this. Like I said, I know that what kind of spearheaded this was it's EMS Week. It's also May's Mental Health Awareness Month. But just as every mental health is important to everyone here, it's important to me as well. And I wanted to sincerely thank everybody for being open and honest and willing to discuss everything that we discussed today.